The City of Neenah is pleased to provide video recordings of City Council meetings. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents from the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or completing the electronic feedback form on the city website. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order the City of Neenah Common Council meeting for November 6th, 2024. The clerk will call the roll. Please indicate your presence on your roll call device as well.
Alderman Boyette is excused. Alderman Erickson.
Here.
Hillstrom.
Here.
Lendrum.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Paulnow.
Here.
Alderman Steiner appearing by phone. Alderman Ellis.
Here.
And Council President Borchard.
Here.
Do we have an issue with the?
No.
Maybe just mine. I have an issue.
No, all of us.
Oh, they're all that way?
Let's see. Steiner, Boyette, Paulnow.
Yeah, their displays aren't working.
We're gonna have to do this old school.
Should be okay.
Okay, we don't have our screen up for that. Thank you. Alderman Paulnow will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no appointments this evening, so the next item on the agenda, is there any objection to unanimous consent of approval of the council minutes and proceedings of October 16th, 2024? Any objection to unanimous consent?
Mayor, I have one suggestion. My name was omitted from the last committee of the whole meeting that I was present.
Okay, we'll make that correction. Thank you. Any other concerns? Seeing none, those council minutes and proceedings are approved. The next item on the agenda is the public hearing. There are 3 public hearings. I will announce them individually. The first public hearing is consideration of special use permit for 700 Main Street, convenience store Class A, fermented malt retail license. Is there anyone who would like to speak in the public hearing for that item? Anyone here to speak on that item? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, I will close that public hearing and move on to the next. Consideration of special use permit for 1013 Main Street, convenience store Class A, fermented malt retail license. Is there anyone here who would like to speak regarding that special use permit? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing no one, I will close that public hearing and move on to the last public hearing. Consideration of special use permit for 1305 South Commercial Street, convenience store Class A, fermented malt retail license. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding that item in the public hearing? Anyone? Anyone who would like to speak on that? Seeing no one, I will close that public hearing as well and move on to item number 5, the Plan Commission report pertaining to the public hearings. Because Alderman Steiner is appearing by phone, I will read out the report. Item number 1, this is the meeting of October 29th, 2024, and the full minutes can be found on the city's website. Item number 1, the commission recommends council approve a special use permit for the issuance of Class A fermented malt retail license for property located at 700 Main Street, subject to the conditions of the special use approval letter and license approval. Is there a motion to approve that?
So move.
Second?
There's a motion by Alderman Ellis. Is it seconded by Alderman Paulno? Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, or sorry, cast your vote on your roll call device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0. The next item, Commission recommends Council approve a special use permit for the issuance of a Class A fermented malt retail license for property located at 1013 Main Street, subject to the conditions of the special use approval letter and license approval. Is there a motion to approve that item? Alderman Weber moves and seconded by Alderman Ellis. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner.
It doesn't, oh. There we go.
That motion passes 8-0. And the final item in the Plan Commission report, Commission recommends Council approve a special use permit for the issuance of a Class A fermented malt retail license for property located at 1305 South Commercial Street, subject to the conditions of the special use approval letter and license approval. Is there a motion to approve? There's a motion by Council President Borchert, seconded by Alderman Weber. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0. That is the conclusion of the Plan Commission report. The next item on the agenda is the public forum. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to speak during the public forum? Anyone? Seeing no one, I will close the public forum and move on to item number 9, reports of standing committees, regular Public Services and Safety Committee meeting of October 29th. Chairman Lendrum.
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting out for the regular Public Services and Safety Committee meeting of October 29th, 2024. Minutes can be found on the city website. Item number 1. Committee recommends Council approve the City of Neenah Police Department to enter into a 5-year contract with Axon Enterprises for 10 Axon Fleet 3 in-car camera systems and approve the 2025 payment in the amount of $26,227.83, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Hillstrom. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
Item number 2. Committee recommends Council approve the original Class A fermented malt retail license convenience store application to Christ Oil Company, Christ Food Mart, number 56, 1305 South Commercial Street, Neenah, Wisconsin. David Stark, agent, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Weber. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
Item number 3. Committee recommends Council approve the original Class A fermented malt retail license convenience store application to Deep Petroleum Incorporated, Neenah Mobile, 700 Main Street, Neenah, Wisconsin. Jaswinder Singh, agent, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Paulno. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you. That motion passes 8-0.
Item number 4, committee recommends council approve the original Class A fermented malt retail license convenience store application to Gauri Ganesh LLC, Main Street, Amico, 1013 Main Street, Neenah, Wisconsin. Nirva Patel, agent, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Paulno. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
Item number 5, committee recommends council institute a no parking anytime regulation on the east side of South Commercial Street between Tyler Street and Division Street, and on the west side of South Commercial Street between Division Street and King Street, which shall go into effect September 1st, 2025. And I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Hillstrom. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you. That motion passes 8-0.
Item number 6, committee recommends council approve ordinance 2024-22, revising the municipal code to modify the on-street overnight parking regulations and the penalty for parking during snow emergency proclamations. And I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum,
Second.
seconded by Alderman Paulno. Is there any discussion on this item? Any questions? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
And the last and 7th item, committee recommends council approve ordinance 2024-23, repealing and replacing section 16-36, parent A, parent 1 of the City of Neenah Municipal Code relating to the official traffic maps. And I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Lendrum, seconded by Alderman Weber. Any discussion? Alderman Paulno.
Thank you, Mayor. I voted against this in committee basically based on process. This is changes that have been accumulated over 5 to 6 years and there was like 13 pages of traffic and speed changes, and I just think it was too much to process and to properly vet personally. I just always think, if I explain this to my neighbors, would they be agreeable to all these changes when we really haven't, in my opinion, had the time to properly vet them? Even Engineer Merton said he should have brought this committee to us quite a while back. It just happened to coincide with him getting a new position, and I think that's not the way to properly process changes to our code. So I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Alderman Lendrum.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason why I voted for it in committee is because mostly it was housekeeping. There were some changes. The burden would have fallen on Director Kaiser or the new person that will be replacing James Merton. We are not traffic engineers. And so if there is a problem in the future that we find out, we have been, I think, very flexible in attempting to change those issues. So I'm not afraid to pass this one. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you. That motion passes 7-1.
And that's the end of my report.
Thank you for your report. The next item on the agenda, the regular Finance and Personnel Committee meeting of October 28th, 2024. Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mayor. Reporting out from the regular Finance and Personnel Committee meeting of October 28th, 2024. Minutes can be found on the city website. Item number 1, the committee recommends council approve the purchase equipment and services to upgrade network switches and wireless access points at a cost not to exceed $135,906, with funding coming from the budgeted information systems capital equipment projects for switch upgrades and wireless wireless upgrades. And I so move.
There's a motion by.
Second.
Whoops. Hang on one second.
Okay.
That's okay. Motion by Alderman Erickson and seconded by Alderman Paulno. Is there any discussion on this item? Alderman Erickson.
Just for housekeeping, I'd remove the comma after the 6.
Oh, right. Thank you. Any further discussion? Please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you for your report. The next item on the agenda is the Neenah Menasha Fire Rescue Joint Finance and Personnel Committee meeting of October 15th and Committee of the Whole meeting of October 29th. Council President Borchert.
Both Neenah Menasha, Joint Finance and Personnel Committee and the Committee of the Whole recommend Council, the City of Neenah, and City of Menasha Common Councils approve the offer to the intended candidate for the position of Assistant Chief Fire Marshal, a salary above the midpoint at starting rate of $89,739, and I so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Borchert. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Ellis. Discussion on this item.
Request to speak?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alderman Steiner.
The part I'm wondering, when I'm looking at, I feel like there's a lot of work that's been done in the city in regards to making sure we have consistency as far as, different pay grades and different structures. And I guess I don't know who's in the room, but I'd be interested in just hearing perspective on how this falls into our consistent process, if we have one, for these types of deviations. Because just to be upfront, I do have concerns where if we're making exceptions, that it starts to become contagious across other departments without kind of a set procedure of listing these are the criteria we need in order to deviate from what our standards are. So, if there's anyone in the room that can talk to that, I would appreciate that, because it's something that I am concerned about at this point.
Alderman Steiner, this is Director Fairchild responding. So we do have a policy and procedures in place that allows people to move within the grade based on prior education and experience. I am fairly new to the process as well, so I was not aware that we haven't, by practice, gone to committee for anything above midpoint, so this hasn't really been practice to request that ahead of time. And I did go back to look to see whenever we filled these positions in the past for this same role, the last 2 candidates did come at or below midpoint when making an offer to them. We looked at this person's education and experience in alignment with what our policy states, which is why it was brought forth at a grade and step. It's at the same grade, but at a step higher than midpoint. However, I'm not sure, went to finance to verify that funding level was going to be in place for the next year, which to my understanding was not. Whenever the position was vacated, it was budgeted at midpoint for a new candidate to come in. So as far as the secondary item, that's a separate issue, but as far as placing somebody in a step and grade, the grade is always assessed based on what is the position's complexity and responsibilities, and so that's already defined by a algorithmic process that was put in place by Carlson and Detman that I can now stand behind now that I fully understand it and can actually control it. But as far as the step where a person is placed, that's a little bit more flexible based on that person's experience, education requirements.
Does this person, does this then fit within that criteria at this time in terms of our exceptions?
In terms of the policy that just added, it would not be able to go over, and it's like within a half step, so you can choose to go up or down on a half step based on the need to fill the position. If it's a harder to fill position, you can stand behind going ahead and allowing it to go to the next step, but that's as far as you'd be able to get it to go.
Okay. I guess maybe I'm still not quite clear.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
So is this out of the realm of what we would normally expect, or is this kind of within that flexible range?
So it is above midpoint, which is not practice. We have never brought in somebody above midpoint by history.
Okay. Thank you.
Council President Borchert?
That was my question. I was curious about precedent. I was on this when we were on committee, back and forth. My biggest concern in speaking with people that have been council before, when there wasn't something from Carlson and Dedman about procedures, and my concern is others that have not come in at midpoint now coming back and not necessarily following the procedures that are in place. And that's my biggest concern about setting a precedent now, because I'm not saying that this would open the floodgates, but it would sound like if I was another person looking to apply or a director looking to get an employee in, that my biggest concern is not following policies and procedures that we have in best practices.
So while I can't speak to anything above midpoint, the policies are very clear on getting somebody to an accurate step within midpoint. Above midpoint then has to come to you all for approval, which we haven't typically in the past done because we've always been able to mitigate that below midpoint.
Thank you.
Alderman Erickson?
Thank you. I have a question about the city of Menasha. Have they agreed to this as well, or do they need to agree to it after we vote on it?
I think they've already gone to council.
They have already gone to council with this on Monday.
And what was the result of that?
It did pass.
Okay, thank you.
Just a point of clarification, these are considered Neenah employees, correct?
They are on the Neenah's payroll. We process it and then we back bill Neenah for their portion.
Alderman Ellis?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, if I can, I'd like to go back to this. For when we last spoke in these proceedings, you shared that this was the candidate for what you were looking for. I should have asked at that time, and I didn't. Had anyone else applied for that position, internally or not, that would have met our standards of midpoint or less, aside from the candidate that's being recommended? And if so, were those other folks any less qualified than the person that you're presenting to us for this position?
When we had 12 or 13 original applicants, at the end we were down to 4. Of the 4, I think 3 of them all had the same qualifications. 1 had less in an education requirement. On the first page of everybody's application, they were there was a spot for them to put down an expected salary request. All 4 of the final candidates had a salary request that was higher than the midpoint.
Was their current salary at that midpoint, or was it less?
I think one of the 4 candidates had a current salary less than the midpoint. Okay. The other 3, I believe, had higher salaries than the midpoint. Is that correct? That's correct. That information is buried further down in the application process. Okay. And I was just made aware of that part of it earlier this week, last Friday.
Thank you.
Alderman Lundrum. I'm sorry, were you done, Alderman Ellis?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Lundrum.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like I'm taking a little bit more of a global view of this, just personally, and in my admittedly uneducated opinion on this, but I can't help thinking that the next department in the city, whatever department it is, will understandably ask for over midpoint for their next candidate, and so on and so on. And this is piecemeal, and I don't understand the piecemeal concept of doing this. Personally, I just feel like it needs to be in a more controlled algorithm, if you will, for all the departments at the same time, not just fire first, then it will go to community development and so on. That's all. Thank you.
Alderman Paulno.
Thank you. Yeah, originally when this came in the committee, I was kind of a lone voice at that time because I was concerned with that same thing of setting precedent. And we're, as I understand it, we are outside of our policy. We have a policy to review all salaries every 3 to 5 years. So we were on that scale, we were already outside of our policy. And I guess another thing, I don't know what I don't know as far as analytics or anything like this position comparative to other communities. We don't have any of that information either, which is always problematic because we're kind of in a silo now. I mean, you know, is this position 80% of normal? Is it 60%? Is it 110%? I guess I would ask Director Fairchild, is there any way you could give us insight to that? Where at this position, at this grade for dollar amount, where would that fall in?
So I haven't had an opportunity to go to market to see how it is in other communities. At the time that we did our market analysis, we were in the 60 percentile range, but that was, again, almost 3 years ago. So the market has changed considerably since then, and we've only adjusted it slightly based on a cost of living increase to the scale by, I believe, 1.5% this last go-around. So we are probably falling behind, but we will catch up, I think, whenever we do our cost of living next year, if that's approved in budget.
I mean, if you were sitting in this chair, would you vote yes or no for this?
If I was sitting in this chair, based on past practice, I would probably say at midpoint, and because we do have a secondary candidate that I feel we could have negotiated at midpoint or below.
So you would vote no? I would. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Alderman Hillstrom.
Yeah, Director Fairchild again. So they say what they want. And do we go back with them then and say, this is our midpoint and this is what we're willing to pay? Is there some negotiations that go back and forth here?
So I had to sit down with this individual whenever it first came to pass, and I said, this is what we, Chief and I, if we can get council's blessing, would be willing to present to council. They came to us with a counteroffer, which was, in my opinion, egregious. It was a lot of counter requests above and beyond the salary. I had the conversation with the individual. You have to understand, you will be home every evening with your family, every weekend. You won't be working as many hours, and there's something to said about time. And he has absolutely every right to go and say, I need to be able to provide for my family. I don't want to take a promotion if I'm not making more money. But I feel like time is valuable, and he obviously disagreed. He had a lot of counter proposals that looked like he was still trying to stay within a union contract. And this is not a union position.
Thank you.
Alderman Weber.
Director Fairchild, I want to go back to Alderman Lundrum's comments, questions. Do you feel that an approach like this is a piecemeal approach, or I'm not quite clear on how you mitigate these types of scenarios? Because if I think about how it works in the business world, when you're hiring people, it is a point-by-point, case-by-case situation. So I don't know you can do it all the time by policy or by, if you're looking for a certain level of talent. So I'm Just curious, how you feel about that.
So prior to changing the policy, it was basically a throw a dart at the pay scale anywhere between the base and the midpoint, and made in order to make a salary offer to an individual. It was, I want to make $40,000, but we were offering 38. As long as it was below midpoint, we would just offer them the 40,000. Now the policy says we have an algorithmic system to say if you've got this above the minimum requirements, we can slide you on the scale up to this amount, but not to exceed that. If that amount exceeds midpoint, then we would come here, which that's the part that's different than what we've done in the past. And I can understand not wanting to change precedents there. I understand that. It's the secondary item that we're speaking to that is the piecemeal piece to this.
Got it. And those are two separate motions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion fails. 0 yes to 8 noes.
Item number 2, both the Neenah Menasha Joint Fire and Rescue, Finance, and Personnel Committee and the Committee of the Whole recommend the City of Neenah and the City of Menasha Common Councils provide an add rate to Assistant Chief positions equivalent to 3% differential between the highest paid Assistant Chief and the Shift Commander, and I so move.
There's a motion by Council President Borchert, seconded by Alderman Ellis. Discussion on this item. Alderman Polno.
I would gather that this is a moot point, since the other position failed. I mean,
They're linked, but they're separate items.
okay, fair enough.
Alderman Steiner.
Yeah, I guess on this one, I understand what the intent is behind this. If you get this type of situation that can occur, again, I think my mind goes to consistency, and I'd be, I guess, more receptive if we were looking at something like this as a policy across the city, rather than just one department. So from that standpoint, I do plan on voting no.
Is there further discussion on this item? Alderman Lundrum.
Thank you, Mayor. The chief had, the fire chief had mentioned morale as part of this, his explanation for this in his department. But if this would pass, to me, and I'm guessing, the morale then of the other city departments would then go down. So the fire might go up, but I can't imagine how this would be received in the other departments and how their morale would then be. Thank you.
Alderman Erickson.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems to me that if we would do this, it should be something that would be done during the budget workshop, not something done on its own. And if this is something that you felt strongly about, it should be put in your budget for the fire department and not as an outlier. And I will be voting no.
Alderman Polno.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also be voting no on this, but I'd also, I think, and I would ask Director Fairchild, would this not be a good time, I guess, I don't know when this discussion is happening or would happen, to review the entire department? Because as I understand, in 2002, when the merger happened, is when we did our baseline for employees. So I don't know what I don't know. I mean, there's different statistics out there of how many employees we need, what positions, and that, as far as efficiency of even needing this position, like in the private sector, or like Chief Olson just did when he reviewed a bunch of positions and just changed things. When would that happen in this department?
So I would have to defer that to the chief on
Okay.
assessing his department and what the needs are. I would speculate that anytime you have a vacancy, you should evaluate the department positions and operations. Director Kaiser's doing that right now with the departure of Mr. Merton. He's looking at, does this make sense the way it is? Do we restructure? Do we re-outline? Are we doing things as efficiently as possible? Can we change the way we do business? But that, I don't know fire operations. I would have to defer that to the chief.
Okay. But that's typically when you would do that, correct? I mean, normally,
Anytime there's a vacancy, you would start looking at that, or anytime that you're doing a market analysis, and whenever you're reviewing those job descriptions collectively, you would do it then as well.
okay, thank you.
Alderman Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate, Chief, what you're trying to aspire to do here. I truly do. Getting the right quality people is a good thing. What I have burning in my ears from what I've heard tonight and looking at this is echo from Alderman Steiner, who said that this should be looked at as more of a policy, so we have more of a synchronized with all department heads. My recommendation would be that we would say no to this specific request at this time. As Alderperson Erickson brought up, part of the budgetary process, but the challenge then to your department and to the other departments is to take a look at what a policy may be that we could play with across the board for all of the departments that would be as close to what we could say it would be fair and just to all. Because I agree, the Band-Aid approach is not healthy.
So we did do a policy revision whenever we did the grade and step, and we put the steps into place. So that part is consistent amongst all departments. It is the differential pay is something that we would need to look at to see if that's something we want to create as a policy and
Yep.
to whom that would apply.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion fails. 0 yes, 8 no. Next item on the agenda, reports of special committees and liaisons, Board of Public Works meeting of October 17th, 2024. Are you ready for it, Alderman Hillstrom?
I'm ready. Is everybody else ready?
It's a long report.
And there's two of them.
Yes.
So the results from this meeting can be found on the city website. And there's two different meetings. So first, the informational items. And A is the board approved change order number 1, contract 9-24, epoxy pavement markings to Century Traffic LLC for an additional pavement markings in the amount of $16,232.75. Item B, the board approved pay request number 7, contract 1-24, sanitary and storm sewer and laterals, water main and street construction on Belmont Avenue, Belmont Court, Cedar Street, and Stevens Street to David Tenner Corporation in the amount of $767,791.57. Item C, the board approved pay request number 6, contract 2-24, sanitary and storm sewer and laterals, water main and street construction on East Doty Avenue to Kruja Construction in the amount of $289,568.25. Item D, the board approved pay request number 67, contract 3-24, sanitary and storm sewer and laterals, water main and street construction on Bayview Road, Quarry Lane, and Reed Street to Donald Eppes and Sons in the amount of $362,257.60. Item E, the board approved pay request number 4, contract 5-24, sanitary and storm sewer and laterals, water main and street construction on North Street to David Tenner Corporation in the amount of $147,718, and I believe that's 20 cents. There's one number missing there. Item F, the board approved pay request number 4, contract 7-24, contract pavement and sidewalk repairs to Jim Fisher Incorporated in the amount of $76,452.57. Item G, the board approved pay request number 1, contract 2-24W, booster station, contract B, process, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing construction to Sable Mechanical LLC in the amount of $184,801.88. Item H, the board approved change number 2, contract 1-24W, removal and replacement of carbon dioxide tank and related appurtenances. I'll never get that word. To Rhodey Brothers in the amount of $16,684. Was one council action item from this meeting. The board recommends council approve final pay request, contract 9-24, epoxy pavement markings to Century Traffic LLC in the amount of $111,979.95, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Hillstrom, seconded by Alderman Lendrum. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device.
Yes.
Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
Okay, now reporting from the Board of Public Works meeting of November 4th. Those minutes can also be found on the city website. There is one informational only item. The board approved change order number 1, contract 10-24, re-roof traffic shop area to HIS Waterproofing, Roofing and Sheet Metal, Hartford, Wisconsin, for installation and tapered wedge board in the amount of $2,693.90. Then there are 2 council action items. Item A, the board recommends council approve final pay request, contract 10-24, re-roof traffic shop area to HIS Waterproofing, Roofing and Sheet Metal, Hartford, Wisconsin, in the amount of $43,127.90, and I would so move.
There's a motion by Alderman Hillstrom, seconded by Alderman Lendrum. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device. Thank you, Alderman Steiner. That motion passes 8-0.
And finally, my last item. The board recommends council award contract 11-24, Douglas Park Stormwater Pond to Kellnan and Goss LLC, Appleton, Wisconsin, the amount of $519,738.16. And I would like, after I make the motion, Director Kaiser to talk about how this came in under budget and how many bid on this project. So I would like to make the motion for this to pass.
There's a motion by Alderman Hillstrom, seconded by Council President Borchert. And a request for Director Kaiser to inform us on this item.
Thank you, Mayor. We had 9 bidders on the project, so good interest for this. We were pleased with that. The low bid from Callan and Goss, roughly $520,000, was about $150,000 less than the engineer's estimate. I think, looking at the work and the timing of the work, or the timing of the bid, I think that helped us considerably. It's a good winter project to keep crews moving. As it turned out, the low bidder had particular interest in keeping crews working because they had a project get delayed up in another community, and so they can reassign those crews to this project to get it taken care of. So several things fell into place to give us a good price.
Alderman Paulno?
Thank you, Mayor. One question that concerns me, how many pumps are in this pond?
0.
Excellent. That's what I want to know.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Yes. Seeing none, please cast your vote on your voting device and give Alderman Hillstrom a glass of water. From the pond. Not from the pond. Alderman Steiner, thank you. That motion passes 8-0.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you for your report. There is no report from Community Development Authority, Sustainable Neenah Committee, Alderman Lundrum.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everyone, not just council, but everyone in Neenah, that we still have several rain barrels, and those are free. And so if you want a rain barrel, let me know, and I will hook you up. But you do have to buy your own spigot. We will show you how to put it in. We'll help you with that. But if you want one, let me know. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you for your report. Bergstrom Mahler Museum, Council President Borchert.
No report.
Thank you. Parks and Rec Commission, Alderman Weber.
Thank you, Mayor. The Park and Rec Commission met on October 17th. The minutes can be found on the city website. Just a few items I'd like to make mention to the council. There was some discussion around the new memorial monument out at the cemetery. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, it's pretty awesome. Associated with that, there was a task force pulled together kind of just to work on a QR code in order to have information linked to that monument. And that task force had a few meetings, and I'd just like to thank citizen Frank Cuthbert for helping to drive that task force. We finished up tonight and got that settled, so now Mike Kading, Director Kading, and his team can move forward with that, so appreciate that. Couple of business items. Cook Park play equipment was approved, so that can be finalized and move forward. And then there was two items of new business that were kind of tied together. We did have some knowledge sharing from Director Kading on the Wisconsin DNR Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. It's kind of like a grant program through the state. And we also discussed the ongoing project for the Doty Park shoreline rebuild, if you will, because it's in such bad shape. And since the meeting that we had, too, everybody's probably seen already in the news that Neenah was one of the 12 grant projects awarded from that Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program. So that's excellent to help us fund part of that. So good news there. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you for your report. Are there any petitions? Are there any council directives? Unfinished business? Alderman Paulno.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to kind of bring up, Council President Borchert had brought it up previous in regard to the informational items from the Board of Public Works, maybe potentially putting them on the consent agenda. As melodic as Alderman Hillstrom's voice is, I just, for efficiencies, and I just don't think we need, I mean, unless there's a statutorial requirement to have those read out at every meeting. I mean, this is.
Yeah, there.
You listening to Chris and I, Bill?
Maybe.
We're just talking about. There's actually not a statutory requirement. The only statutory requirement, believe it or not, is that there be a report out of the Board of Public Works annually, unless required, and the term was used oftener. If the mayor doesn't require it oftener, then it could be done once a year in March. Has to be done March of each year, and it could be in writing. It could be with the melodic voice of Alderman Hillstrom or Alderman Paulno.
Well, we don't want to go there. But we could put these on the consent agenda and then have one report a year, basically?
Yes.
Okay. I would vote for that.
Pardon me? Right. Consent agenda as an action item, though.
So informational item won't even need to be on the agenda then, or?
What are you saying?
Oh, okay.
Please.
Cool. Thank you.
I guess my
That
point
under
was,
consideration.
excuse me, Mayor, on pay requests and things that are getting reported out as standard business of the board, I don't know that we'd want that on consent agenda, because that would entail action by the council.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, fair enough. So the best bet is not to have it on the agenda at all?
I don't know why we couldn't have it on as informational and just skip over it as far as the readout.
So we all might miss Alderman Hillstrom.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know I would.
I would.
I agree with both those points, that if it is a consent item, then that implies that there's being action taken,
Right.
which there's not. So that's a good catch.
Yep.
On the other, yes, it could just be on the agenda as reported information, which is all available to the public. So,
Cool.
Thank you for that reminder. I would just at this point like to give a huge thank you to our clerk, Shar Nagel. After conducting 9 days of early voting, getting all prepared for that, having record numbers of people here at City Hall every day. She also was here yesterday for 26 hours, 4 a.m. until 6 a.m. this morning. So unbelievable. She has been constantly professional and just the most excellent clerk I can imagine to be conducting this election, which was just a huge undertaking. I'd also just like to thank her and for all you did an amazing job, and all of our poll workers as well. I know Alderman Lendrum spent an awful lot of time here as well with early voting and with the election yesterday, and just everybody who contributed to undertaking the job of conducting this election. I'm just incredibly proud of all of you, so thank you very much.
I would just like to shout out to our poll workers as well. It takes a team to do an election like this, and they all pulled together. When a call went out for help, they responded. They didn't ask, how am I going to get paid or anything like that. They just came and helped out a lot. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that was done. We had 3 ladies. That's all they did was file absentee ballots in our vault for days and days and days. So that was kind of behind the scenes work. But it takes a team. And like I said, it was awesome to see everybody come together. And when there was a call, help came. And I appreciate that.
Thank you for leading that team, Shar. Alderman Lendrum.
Thank you, Mayor. As a poll worker and talking to all the other poll workers as we do in our meetings, it's everyone appreciates Clerk Nagel so much, Shar Nagel. I don't want to call you just Shar. Sounds so informal, but all the precincts appreciate that we always go through the entire election night without a hitch. And I'm proud because when I do have a voter come in, or we all have a voter come in, and they want to question the procedures, we always have an answer because Shar provides that for us. She informs us. And so we are empowered to know what happens behind the scenes. So every single one of the poll workers appreciates Shar so much, and she's just incredible. I can't say enough about her. So it was I can't believe I'm saying this, but it was a rather relaxing day. I mean, because everything was covered. She took care of everything. So thank you.
And now you should probably go home and rest.
Take Sunday off.
Is there any additional new business?
I just want to remind everyone that we have budget workshops Monday and Tuesday night. We put out the agendas, and they both start at 6 p.m. The following week, we will have the amendments and adoption of the budget on Tuesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. Lastly, once we get into the amendments, the sooner you can get them to me to help you write them up, the sooner I can get them out to everybody. That's all.
Thank you for that reminder. Anything else for new business? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, we're adjourned.
The City of Neenah is pleased to provide video recordings of City Council meetings. Neenah residents can get information about City Council meetings, City Committee meetings, meeting agendas, and other documents from the City website, www.neenahgov.org. Neenah residents can express their opinions about city issues by contacting the mayor's office, contacting their city alderman, or completing the electronic feedback form on the city website. All public portions of the meetings are recorded in entirety and are not edited.